Hello and welcome. In this 11th video of the series, we are going to discuss part 2 of invertebrate zoology. In part 2, we are going to focus upon 4 phyla, which will be Annelida, Arthropoda, Mollusca and Echinodermata. Like all other earlier videos of the series, we have undertaken an analysis of last 15 years of question paper and we have identified the topics and subtopics that you ought to be focusing upon in order to have an effective preparation for civil service main examination. So in this video you are going to learn on how to go about the topics and potential question from these 4 phyla. I'm sure you will be finding this video useful and giving you a meaningful direction for your preparation. So over to the discussion on these 4 phyla.
Hello everyone, so now we'll move on to the next part of the invertebrate syllabus analysis, and this is from Annelida to Echinodermata phylum. Earlier we did till Nemathelminths and now we'll begin from phylum Annelida. So firstly, these are the main topics of the syllabus. You have 4 phylum after Nemathelminths: Annelida, Arthropoda, Mollusca and Echinoderms, and all of them are true coelomates because in them the coelom is present. There is a body cavity apart from the gut cavity and it is lined by mesoderm throughout, so it is a true coelom. Although Annelida, Arthropoda, Mollusca, they belong to the category schizocoelomates because in them the coelom is derived by the splitting of the mesoderm, while Echinodermata belongs to enterocoelomate, where the coelom is derived from the outpocketing of the archeteron, which is the primitive gut. So under Annelida, that's why the first topic itself is coelom, because from here onwards all the animals are true coelomates. And also there is a situation known as the metamerism, where the body is divided into different segments and the organs in them are repeated also. And true metamerism is a characteristic which is particular to Annelida, where they show external and internal metamerism. Then within Annelida there is modes of life in polychaetes. There are 3 classes under Annelida and the polychaetes are most diverse in their habitat and habit. Then you have to study 3 life histories of 3 different annelids. One is a polychaete, that is Nereis. Then there is an oligochaete, that is earthworm, and then one which belongs to the Hirudinea class, and that is the leech Hirudinaria. Then coming to the second phylum, that is phylum Arthropoda, very important phylum. Different aspects you need to cover here. Number 1 is the larval forms of Crustacea and as well as parasitism in Crustacea. Then vision as well as respiration you need to understand in arthropod with respect to 3 different organisms. One is a crustacean, that is prawn, and then there is an insect cockroach, and then there is an arachnid scorpion. So 3 different arthropods and what is how the vision is in them and how they respire. Then modification of mouthparts in insects. Insecta is the largest class under Arthropoda. So under that there are different mouthparts which are modified. The basic one is the biting and chewing mouthparts, and that is something you find in cockroach. And then there are modifications of each. Then you have to study the mouthparts in mosquito, housefly, honeybee and butterfly. So all these different mouthparts you need to cover. Then insects also show a wonderful mechanism of metamorphosis. They may or may not show it, so you need to cover that metamorphosis in insects and how they are regulated, how the process is regulated through hormonal control. And then the social behavior or eusociality in the honeybee, apis and termites also. So these are all the topics of Arthropoda. Then under Mollusca you have to do a generalized overview of how mollusks feed and how they respire and how they do locomotion, and then general features and life history of 3 different mollusks. One is Lemmelidens, then there is pila, and then there is sepia. So these three you need to cover. And the most important topic under mollusca is the process of torsion and detorsion in one of the classes, that is the class Gastropoda. Then in the last phylum of invertebrates, it's phylum Echinodermata. Again, you need to cover the feeding, respiration and locomotion in general in all the echinoderms. Then very important topic is the larval form of echinoderms. You need to compare it with the rest of the invertebrate larval forms as well. And then general features in life history of Asterias, which is the sea star, that you have to cover. So that is, these are the main topics in the syllabus. If you analyze the number of questions, then obviously Arthropoda wins in that case, because the maximum questions in the last 10 years have been asked from this section. So every year at least one question has come, and sometimes more than one question has been asked from this section, Arthropoda. And the next most important phylum amongst these four is the phylum Echinodermata. So every year at least one question comes from echinoderms also. Then Annelida, not that much, but again still important, especially the class Polychaeta and its diversity is a very important aspect you need to cover here. And in mollusca, 6 questions in the last 10 years, 5 of them have been only on torsion and detorsion. So that topic in mollusca is the most important topic. Now I'll come to individual analysis of each of these 4 phyla, and then we'll see how to approach individual phylum and what areas you need to put your emphasis on. So firstly, with phylum Annelida, the first topic mentioned in the syllabus is coelom and metamerism. Now coelom topic you cover in the starting of the invertebrate itself, when you talk about acoelomates and pseudocoelomates and then eucoelomates. And under eucoelomates there are 2 categories. Eucoelomates can be schizocoelomates or enterocoelomates. So they are schizo and entero, and this is something you cover in the initial part. So here it is just a repetition only. So schizocoelomate includes 3 phylum, that is Annelida, Arthropoda and Mollusca, and enterocoelomate is the phylum Echinodermata. And chordates are also enterocoelomates, but that is not something included in invertebrates. So coelom you have already covered, so here no need to repeat this part, just straight away come to metamerism. So what is metamerism? It is the longitudinal division of body into some linear series of sections which are very similar to each other, and the similar body segments are called as metameres or somites, and from that term the metamerism term has come. So the process of metamerism is for the first time is seen in Annelida only, and in each segment there are many organs that are repeated. So there are appendages which are repeated, there are muscles which are repeated, the nerves are repeated, the blood vessels are repeated, and excretory organs, nephridia, are also repeated. So that is what the true metamerism is, that there is repetition of not just external body segments, but internally there is repetition of organs as well. Now under metamerism, another thing you need to focus on is the 2 aspects. So metamerism you will cover with respect to external and internal. So external and internal. Then another aspect you need to cover is the complete and incomplete metamerism. And the third thing you need to cover here is comparison with pseudo metamerism, because this is a characteristic you see in cystodes under platyhelminths. So comparison of metamerism with pseudo metamerism, where the segments are called as proglottids, and the new segments that are added from the neck, they are after the neck, the oldest is posterior most in location and the newest is near the neck region, while that is completely opposite in a true metamerism. So all these things you need to cover, and how in pseudo metamerism the segments can be shed through the process of apolysis, but here they are not. So comparison of true metamerism, that is U metamerism. So you can always write it as EU metamerism, and then there is another, that is pseudo metamerism. Then there are different theories related to metamerism which you need to cover, and under theories the number one itself is the pseudo metamerism theory. So that is the first one. The second one is the cyclomerism theory. So the pseudo metamerism and cyclomerism. Then the third one is the Combe and fission theory, and the fourth one, which is the most accepted, is the locomotion theory, given by R.B. Clarke in 1964, which explained not just metamerism with respect to only annelids, but even further all the higher phyla. When they show metamerism, what is the purpose of it? So all these four theories you need to cover under metamerism. So that completes the first aspect under phylum Annelida. Then we come to modes of life in polychaetes. So class Polychaeta, there are three classes under the annelids, and class Polychaeta is having the most diversity. It is having the greatest diversity amongst annelids, and majority of polychaetes are marine, and they exhibit a variety of habits and habitats for which they show different anatomical and physiological adaptations, and that is what you need to cover here. You have different polychaetes. Number one are the planktonic polychaetes, which swim near the surface of the sea water, and thus what are the adaptations they undergo in order to protect themselves from predator also, or excessive solar radiation, and how do they derive their food, and what kind of sense organs are found in them. So all of that you need to cover under planktonic polychaetes. Then the next category is the crawling polychaetes. So these are the polychaetes which will be found at the sea bottom. They will be freely moving animals which crawl on the sea bottom. Then in order to adapt to that condition, what kind of sense organs do they have, and what kind of diet do they have, if they are carnivorous or algae eaters or detritus feeders, what are the adaptations they have in order to gather their food. An example, so some common example, the Nereis, which you have to individually study, also is an example of a crawling polychaete. Then the next category is the burrowing polychaetes, and burrowing polychaetes which also includes Nereis at times, because sometimes Nereis often buries itself, so it's more of a crawling as well as burying. But then specifically there are certain polychaetes such as Ernicola, Glycera, Teribella. All of them actually make burrows and reside inside that and capture their prey also being inside that burrow, and rest. They also ingest detritus, whatever falls into that burrow. So these are the burrowing polychaetes. And then the next category is tuberculous polychaetes, which are similar to burrowing polychaetes, that they do make a burrow, but they also secrete a tube around them. Some of them often don't also make a burrow. They may secrete a tube on the surface of the sea bottom also. So these are all different types of tuberculous polychaetes which secrete their own tube or collect material to form a tube. And there are different examples, Ovinia and Chaetopterus. Chaetopterus is very famous because it makes a U-shaped parchment tube which it first burrows inside the sea bottom and then secretes a U-shaped parchment tube. So that is very important and famous example under tuberculous polychaetes. And then the last category is of commensal and as well as another category, that is parasitic polychaetes. So commensal polychaetes are the ones which live in the tubes of other polychaetes or other invertebrates such as sea cucumbers and sea stars. So they live with them, these different invertebrates. And Myxostoma is one common example of commensal polychaetes. Then some polychaetes can also be parasitic. They can be ectoparasite of the gill chamber of crustaceans or certain fishes, and Histriobdella is one famous example of that. So all the different categories and diversity, what are the adaptations, what are the sense organs, how do they capture food, whether they are carnivores or not. So all these are the you will be covering under the diversity modes of life of polychaetes. And this is very important question because it has often been asked. If you go beyond 10 years, then you'll notice that many times the question on diversity of polychaetes has been asked. Then we come to the general features and life history of the three specimens, and Nereis in that is the polychaete. And one main aspect you need to cover here is the difference between Nereis and Heteronereis. So when Nereis becomes reproductively active, then it turns into Heteronereis, which has two different body parts, the atoki and epitoki. So what are the modifications that occur? Comparison of Nereis with Heteronereis, comparison of their parapodia, also comparison of their general body structure. And once Heteronereis is formed, it will just undergo mating while releasing the sperm and ova in the seawater, and fertilization takes place, and then eventually Heteronereis will die. So the general features would include all the systems. It would include the basic morphology of the organism, and it would include systems like digestive system, nervous system, reproductive system, the respiratory system, and the excretory system. So you'll have to cover all these three organisms with respect to study of morphology and then all these systems. Now moving on to the next phylum, that is phylum Arthropoda. Phylum Arthropoda is the largest phylum of the animal kingdom and thus very important for the exam also. The syllabus in this part is also huge, and a lot of questions from the phylum Arthropoda section is asked in the exam. The first two topics in this section is from Crustacea and the class Crustacea, and that includes the parasitism as well as the larval forms. So there is a huge diversity in crustaceans, and all of them, they have different larval forms. So a generalized question of describe larval forms of Crustacea can also be asked in the exam, and sometimes, which has been asked also, specific larval forms like Alema larva, write a note on Alema larva, and that questions like that have also been asked. So you need to focus on some of the important larval forms in Crustacea. And these larval forms include, number one, the Nauplius larva. This is a larva which is common in all the crustaceans. Then there is another, that is Metanauplius, Zoe and Protozoa. Then Mysis or Schizopoda, Phylozoma, and Alema. So these are the larval forms you need to cover. They are found in different subclasses of crustaceans. Different forms are there, but all of them move through the Nauplius stage. So this is the basic stage. Diagrams here are very important. The appendages here are very important. So all the different appendages found in them, and any specialized structure, or if there is any modification in the maxillipedes, that is something also you need to note. And third thing is whether the legs are uniremous or biremous. That is something also you need to focus here in these larval stages. Diagrams very important. Then there are two more larvae, that is Cypris and Keen Trojan. These are the two larval forms which you find in the parasitic crustaceans, so ostracods and all that, and in case of Saculina you have this Keen Trojan larva. So they are important from the point of view of the parasitic crustaceans. Significance of these larval stages and their comparison with other invertebrate larval forms is also something you should focus upon while preparing the larval forms of Crustacea. The second topic is parasitism in Crustacea. So questions are asked like specifically from a particular subclass. For example, discuss parasitism in Copepoda, comment on structural peculiarity of parasitic copepods, or a generalized question can be asked like give an account of parasitism in crustaceans citing suitable examples. So why Copepoda? Because that is the largest. The copepods have a majority of these are crustacean parasites, so that is very important. The parasitism in Copepoda within Crustacea is very important. So you should prepare parasitism in Crustacea under four aspects. Number one would be in Copepoda, and under Copepoda there are different orders like Coligoideae, Notodelphoideae, Monstruloideae. All these need to be covered here. And the second one is under parasitism in Branchiura, and specifically here Argulus or the sea lice is the fish lice is very important. So the diagrams also then will be important. The structural modifications in appendages which help them become a better parasite, this should you should focus on. Then the next one is Cirripedia. So parasitism in Cirripedia, here you should focus on two orders. One is Rhizocephala and the other is order Apoda. There are other orders also, but these two are main important ones. And then the last one is the parasitism in Malacostraca, and here the order Amphipoda and Isopoda are important. So these are the four groups you need to study under parasitism in Crustacea, and basic modification of organs of attachment or piercing organs, something that is important here. The next topic is vision and respiration in arthropods, and that you have to study with respect to three different arthropods: the prawn, which is a crustacean, cockroach, which is an insect, and scorpion, which is an arachnid. So firstly, prawn vision. So vision in arthropods can be through two ways. Either can be simple eyes, or there may be compound eyes. So compound eyes, individual eye unit in them is called as ommatidium. So here you need to focus on the ommatidium, the structure, what is the composition, the regions, the outer dioptrical region where there is cornea, corneagen cells, crystalline cone and cone cells, and then there is the internal retinal part or the receptor region. So diagram here is very important. So in case of prawn, there are only two stalked eyes which have which are ommatidia only, so they are compound eyes. But in case of cockroach, you have both. Cockroach has two compound eyes, a pair of compound eyes, and a pair of simple eye called as ocelli also. So there is a simple eye as well as compound eye in cockroach. On the other hand, scorpion only has simple eyes. So in scorpions, which are arachnids, they have a pair of large median indirect eyes, and then there are three pairs of lateral direct eyes, and all of them are simple eyes. So in total they have 8 eyes, the arachnids. So that is something which you need to do. And the comparison here would be of the median indirect eyes and lateral direct eyes. So in case of scorpion, there is the median indirect and the lateral direct eyes. So these two eyes you need to focus on. The diagram is important, how the functionality is different between the two. Now coming to respiration in arthropods, so that is a little elaborate. And in case of prawns, there are 3 different structures which help in respiration. So there is the lining of the brachiostegoid, that is respiratory, and the 3 pairs of epipodites, that also functions as a respiratory structure. And the third is that there are 8 pairs of gills also present in case of prawns. So all these 3 are the structures. Branchiostygite is the lining which encloses the gill chamber. Epipodites are highly vascularized leaf-like membrane structures which are attached to the coxa region of the first 3 maxillipedes. They also have respiratory function. And then the gills, which are divided into 3 categories. They are podobranchs, arthrobranchs and pleurobranchs. So among them you have the podobranchs, arthrobranchs, and the true ones, these are pleurobranchs. So podobranch is 1 pair of small gills that is attached to the second maxillipede, and arthrobranchs are 2 pairs. One is smaller, the other is larger, which is attached to the arthrodial membrane of the third maxillipede. And then the pleurobranchs are the true ones, which are 5 pairs of arched gills present in the gill chamber of prawn. So here you should also focus on not just the structures but mechanism of respiration, of exchange of gases as well. And in case of cockroaches and all insects for that matter have elaborate tracheal system, and these tracheal system are connections of the different tube-like structures called as trachea, which are lined with epithelial cells and spiral ridges called as ctenidia. And they have openings on the sides of the body in the abdominal region and thoracic region. These openings are called as spiracles, through which the air enters and it directly goes to each cell. So spiracles are 10 pairs. There are 2 in thoracic region and 8 are in the abdominal segments. So a diagram of the tracheal system and the spiracular network of openings on the lateral side of the body in the pleura of the pleural somites you need to cover here. Now coming to scorpion being an arachnid, and that too a terrestrial arachnid, it has book lungs as respiratory structure. There are 4 pairs of book lungs which are circular and also sometimes referred as the pulmonary sacs, and these 4 pairs are found in the 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th mesosomal segment. So the diagram here, the muscles associated with all these, and why they are called as book lungs, because all the vertical lamellae present in them, they are arranged like the pages of a book. So that is why they are called as book lungs. So the structure is important, the muscles are associated with it, and the mechanism of respiration is also important. Now the most important topic in arthropoda is the modification of mouth parts. 4 questions on this topic have directly been asked in the last 10 years, so very important. So what are the different mouth parts? The basic is biting and chewing mouth part, which is a characteristic of cockroach. So what are the components? The upper lip labrum, mandible, maxillae, the lower lip labium, then there is a tongue called as hypopharynx, and there may be a membrane having taste buds at the undersurface of labrum called as epipharynx. All these are the structures of biting and chewing mouth parts, and then rest of the insect, these are the structures which modify. So in case of honeybee, it is the chewing and lapping mouth parts. So you need to focus and you need to approach this topic with an idea that firstly you understand the basic biting and chewing mouth parts, and then other mouth parts you focus on what are the modifications that are occurring in individual structures in all of them. So in chewing and lapping mouth parts, the upper lip, the mandibles are smooth and spatulate. The maxillae, they are in the maxilla, the maxillary pulp is vestigial, but the galea region becomes elongated and blade-like, which helps the honeybee to make the hive, the hexagonal cells. And there is a proper development of tongue, ligular tongue structure, or which is helping the honeybee to take up the nectar from flowers. So all these modifications occur, but from a basic biting and chewing mouthparts, the modifications have occurred, and in the evolutionary process also that was there. So this is how you should be focusing and approaching this topic. So in case of mosquito, these are the piercing and sucking mouthparts. So all these structures, the labrum, labium, maxillae, mandibles, all and the hypopharynx, all of them modify into needle-like structures which help in piercing through the skin of the host and then sucking up the blood. So that is the modification here. Then in case of housefly, the housefly is only able to ingest liquid food, so the mouthparts are modified to so as to suck up the liquid food. In that case, mandibles are altogether absent because they don't have to chew anything, and these mouthparts are called as the sponging mouthparts. So that is something you need to focus here. And then the butterfly has the siphoning mouthparts, and in siphoning mouthparts, these are highly specialized for sucking up juices of fruits and flowers. So mandible and labium in them are reduced, but the galea of maxillae, it is elongated to form a hollow tube or proboscis, which is coiled up in case of butterflies and moths. So that is the siphoning mouthparts. Very important topic. You need to focus on all the diagrams and the modifications in each, from the basic biting and chewing mouthparts. So next topic is metamorphosis in insects and its hormonal regulation. So under this topic, metamorphosis in insects, you find variety of insects. Some do not show metamorphosis at all. So the egg will hatch into a smaller nymph, and the nymph would look like an adult, but it is smaller in size and it doesn't have reproductive capability, and then it only modifies into an adult, which is also not very different without any wings. So all the apterygote insects which are lacking any wing, these apterygotes are they do not show metamorphosis, so in them we call it as ametaboly. So there is no metamorphosis. But winged insects which are pterygotes, they are showing both hemi as well as holometaboly. So there is hemimetaboly and holometaboly. So holometaboly is complete metamorphosis, where their individual stage in the life cycle are totally different from each other. So there is an egg, there is a larva, there is pupa, and then there is adult. While in case of hemi, there is egg, there is nymph or naiad, and then there is adult. Now the difference here is that in case of hemimetaboly, the nymph is very different from the adult because it lacks wings. The adult has wings, and nymph may have completely different habit and habitat as compared to the adult. So that is something which is different from apterygote ametabolous insects. So that you have to study. And in the hormonal regulation, how different hormones, basically the juvenile hormone and the ecdysteroids, how they play a role. But these are not the only hormones. There is the prothoracotropic hormone PTTH, and there is a hormone known as bursicon, and which mediates the tanning of the cuticle in case of adults. So all these hormones, what role they play in preventing or making the metamorphosis possible. So interplay of them and where they are released from, and what is their target organ, all you need to focus in hormone regulation. Now coming to the social behavior of apis, that is honeybee and termites. So under apis, in social behavior, you need to mainly focus on the three castes, so of the eusociality of both of them. So the three castes, the worker, the queen and drone, what the role they have, how they are modified. So in workers, what are the modifications in the legs, so as for them to be able to do almost all the activities. The queen is only meant for laying the eggs, the drones are only meant for fertilizing the queen, but all the work is done by the worker honeybees. So what they do and what are the modifications they have in their morphology in order to do that. So that is something, that is the social behavior of honeybees. In case of termites, which belong to the order Isoptera, things are a little different. They have a very different social hierarchy as compared to honeybees. So in them there are two castes. So there are fertile castes and there are the sterile castes. So most of the work is done by the sterile castes, which include the workers, which includes the soldiers and a specialized soldier called as nasuits. While the fertile caste includes the macroterus or the long-winged. So there is long-winged fertile caste. There is the short-winged, or also known as the brachyterus, and then there are wingless or aterus fertile caste also. So what are the roles of each, and what are the importance, and what are the work, how they are distributed in all of them, that is something you need to focus under termites. Another topic which you should focus in Arthropoda is status of Onychophora. Why? Because this is the part which is mentioned in the starting of the invertebrate syllabus, but this is something you need to cover here, because the Onychophora is represented by a specimen known as Peripatus, and this was earlier classified within Arthropoda as a subphylum, and it was also placed in annelids also, but now Onychophora has got the status of a phylum. It's a minor phylum, and it is considered a connecting link between Annelida and Arthropoda. So rather than focusing it in the starting, you should cover this topic here, where you should focus on all the structural, morphological features and anatomical features of Peripatus, then its affinities with Annelida, its affinities with Arthropoda. So under affinities, not only the similarities are counted, both similarities as well as dissimilarities are addressed here. So you should focus on that. That is something which will cover this topic, status of Onychophora. Now coming to the next phylum, that is phylum Mollusca. So under this you have three different categories in syllabus. So generalized, you need to do feeding, respiration and locomotion in Mollusca, and question on respiration has been asked. So generalized respiration in Mollusca, so they have different ways through which they do respiration, so you need to focus that here. And because you study three different specimens, Lemillidens, Pila and Sepia, and all three of them have different respiratory structures, that gives you a holistic view of how respiration is different. So if you're covering these three topics, the respiratory system of these three will help you in focusing on the respiration of mollusk in general, and the feeding of these three will help you in focusing the feeding, but there are certain additional things you need to mention. And then locomotion, you will also then do the locomotion of these three, and generalized overview of locomotion in mollusca is something you can then understand. So in case of Pila, there is pulmonary sac also present, there are gills or there is a single gill or ctenidium also present, so that will something which will cover both the aerial as well as aquatic respiration. In case of Lemillidens and Sepia, it is just aquatic respiration, but Lemillidens have a different type of gills. So it has a pair of gills which are present on either side of the body and the mantle, and each gill consists of two laminae, and which is the outer and the inner. So there are in total 4 lamina, and then there is each lamina also has the outer and inner lamellae. So the structure is very complex in case of Lemillidens, so you need to focus. These are filter feeders, and these are the bivalve mollusks, so in them the respiration is completely different. Then Sepia also does aquatic respiration, but here the gills are comparatively much simpler and closely associated with the circulatory system. For feeding, you need to focus, again you can give these 3 examples. Feeding, you need to focus in which class the radula is present or not. Some are carnivorous forms such as sepia, so what they do, what kind of jaws they have, what are the modifications which help them in their carnivorous habit, and the ones which feed on the algae and detritus, what are the modifications. Pila feeding on the vegetation, it has a properly developed radula. Lemmelidens do not have radula, instead they have a style sac in the stomach, and lemmelidens are filter feeders, so the feeding will also be different. For locomotion, you have foot, which is a characteristic in all. Some have foot which is very pointed, which helps in digging, something which you see in case of Dentalium. Then you have a foot which is very big in size, and it is helping in movement. That is something you see in Gastropoda. Then foot may be pointed or it may be boat shaped in case of Lemmelidens or other bivalves. And in case of sepia and other cephalopods, the foot may be modified into these arms. So Decapoda has 10 arms. So example is sepia, which has 8 arms which are smaller and 2 arms which are longer. But Octopoda has only 8 arms. So that is something which is the locomotion in mollusks. That will be covered, and with that you will be able to cover the general features and life history of Lemmelidens, Pila and sepia. And with respect to Lemmelidens, you need to also do the larval stages because they are present. Free living larva is present in Lemmelidens. Pila and sepia on the other hand do not have free living larval forms. Then coming to the most important topic in mollusca, that is torsion and detorsion. So 6 questions in the last 10 years which have been asked from this section, 5 of them were only from torsion and detorsion topics. So you can understand how important this topic is. So torsion is a characteristic which is not seen in all mollusks. It is a characteristic of class Gastropoda, so only in gastropods. So what happens in them is, in torsion there is a 180-degree twist below the neck in the visceral mass, so that the digestive tract also twists and anus also comes to lie in front near the mouth, and with that the posterior mantle cavity also comes to lie in anterior in position. There is change in the nervous system also, which twists in the shape of 8. So that is something which is called as chiastonury. So this term you need to mention. So how the process occurs, how the larval muscles, the muscles in the veliger larva that are called as velar lobe muscles, how they are involved, and differential growth. On one side there is excessive growth, on the other side there is not. How these two mechanisms are involved in the torsion. And detorsion is something which you see in gastropods like Aplysia, where during the larval development torsion occurs, but then the animal detorts and returns back to the original arrangement, and in them the shell has been lost. So there are certain advantages of both torsion and detorsion, the theories associated with it, all of that you need to cover here. Now coming to the last phylum of invertebrates, that is phylum Echinodermata. Echinoderms, the most important topic are the larval forms, and the other important topic under Echinodermata, which is not exclusively mentioned in the syllabus, is something called as mutable connective tissue. Questions on this topic has been asked multiple times. Mutable connective tissue, or also known as the mutable collagenous tissue. So this is the ability of the echinoderms. Using this, they are able to undergo extreme changes in the passive mechanical properties. So at one time they may be completely bendable, they are able to bend and move about. On the other, within a few seconds they become very stiff. So that is something which is the mutable connective tissue, and it is found in different anatomical locations in different echinoderm classes, and they are also involved in the mechanism of autotomy, where under threat the animal is able to leave behind its organ whenever it is being predated upon or something. And all these mechanisms are highly energy sparing, and they help in maintenance of posture also. So very unique feature in echinoderms, and in them basically it is the extracellular matrix which consists of the collagen fibrils and proteoglycans and microfibrils which are involved in formation of this MCT or mutable connective tissue. So this is something you need to focus on under echinodermata. So for feeding in echinoderms, there are different modifications. For example, the sea stars, they are carnivorous and scavengers, and they feed on bivalve snails and sometimes even detritus. Crinoids, they do filter feeding. Holothuroids are scavengers. So all different classes have different modifications. Echinoids have a specialized structure called as Aristotle's lantern, and sometimes a question on that is also asked. So separately prepare a note on Aristotle's lantern, which is a characteristic of echinoids, the sea urchins. So it's a masticatory apparatus which is helping in chewing of the food, and it has these 5-sided pyramidal shape, and each of the side is called as alveolar. So the structure, its diagram is important. So different echinoderms have different feeding mechanism. Then under respiration, you have different structures again. For example, the sea stars, they respire through papillae. They have dermal papillae over their body. And ophiuroids, the respiration occurs through genital bursae. In case of echinoids, there are external gills present around the mouth, and in case of holothuroids, there are gills located inside the cloacal region. So all of them, they respire differently, so that is something you need to cover here. Now coming to the locomotion, it is a very important topic because it is a characteristic feature of echinoderms that they have something called as the water vascular system, also known as the ambulacral system. So through this they are able to do locomotion, and in different classes the water vascular system may be variously modified, but there are basic structures which are found. So the number one is the madreporite, then there is the stone canal, then there is the ring canal, which may be circular or pentamerous in its symmetry, and then there is the radial canals, total 5 in number, and from all these radial canals lateral canals emerge. There are many in number, and these lateral canals then eventually terminate into tube feet, which has 3 different regions. The tube feet has the ampulla, they have a podium, and they have sucker. So these are the 3 different parts of the tube feet, and how it extends and how it helps in the locomotion you have to cover here. There are additional structures also which may be present, something like Tiedeman's bodies, and the Polian vesicles may or may not be present in all classes, all different echinoderms, but if present, they may how many numbers are there, what is their role. This is something you should be covering under locomotion in echinoderms. Now coming to another important topic, that is larval form. So many questions like draw a well-labeled diagram of basic echinoderm larvae, or enlist and draw the diagrams of various echinoderm larvae and describe their evolutionary significance. Questions like these have been asked. So the basic larval forms are actually Dipleurula and Pentactula in case of echinoderms. Then different echinoderms have different specialized larval forms. For example, asteroids have asteroids or the sea stars, they have the Bipinnaria and the Branchiolaria larva. So Bipinnaria and Branchiolaria are not much different. Branchiolaria has just 3 additional branchiolar arms which help in attachment. In case of holothuroids, there are Auricularia larva, and there is the Doliolaria larva. Then the structure, and these two larvae, Auricularia and Doliolaria, they resemble the Bipinnaria and they are barrel shaped. So there, and one key characteristic in echinoderms is that they have the larval stages have bilateral symmetry, which then gets replaced by the pentaradial symmetry in the adult. So that is also a key thing you need to note here. So holothuroids have these two. Then Ophiuroidy has Ophiopluteus. So Ophiuroids have Ophiopluteus larva. And the echinoids have Echinopluteus larva in echinoids. So these are the larval forms in case of all these classes. But in crinoids, there is a larva which is attached to the substratum. So that is unique. In case of crinoids, you have a pentactula as the basic larval structure, and then that modifies into pentacrinoid larva. So that attaches to the substratum. So all these larvae, Bipinnaria, Branchiolaria, Auricularia, Doliolaria, Ophiopluteus, Echinopluteus, pentacrinoid, and the basic ones, Diplurula, Pentactula. Their affinities with other larval forms of the invertebrates, their affinities with also the larval form Tornaria larva of Belanoglossus, which is a hemichordate, that is also important. So significance part would include that one thing, that they are able to move to a large distance and thus help in spreading. But what other evolutionary significance these larval forms have, that is also you need to cover here. And the last part is the general features and life history of Asterias. So here you need to focus on all the systems, specifically the morphology and the water vascular system, because you've already covered under locomotion. You need not to repeat it again under Asterias, a particular to Asterias. All the systems, and then focusing mainly on the reproduction and how they reproduce and what are the different larval stages in the life cycle. So they have two. There is the basic Diplurula. So in fact they have three. The Diplurula stage is within the egg, and the free stages are Bipinnaria and Branchiolaria. How they are formed, how they disperse, how the Bipinnaria settles and changes into Branchiolaria, which attaches to the substratum, and then from that the sea star would emerge out. That would be something you need to cover in this topic. So largely in echinoderms, the questions have been asked on larval forms. So many questions, 5 questions in the last 10 years have been asked from larval forms. Then on the mutable connective tissue, which is not mentioned in the syllabus as such, but still questions on that has been asked. Asterias life cycle question has also been asked, and the questions on water vascular system, that is part of the locomotion, has been asked in the exam. So you need to focus on these aspects under this phylum. So that is all for the discussion of invertebrates. We have covered from the starting, that is the basic idea of invertebrates, the coelom, the symmetry and all that, and then we moved from protozoa and then here till echinoderms. So that's it. Thank you for listening.